I don't know if I can wear my glasses or not. Gonna do some drum programming today with you guys and girls. So I hope you're ready. I think I got some drums loaded up. I do. So once again, if you're just joining for the first time, my name is Matt from Music Producer School. I am giving free lessons currently. I am a producer for 15 years now, DJ, musician, multiple songs on the charts. I've had my songs play in stadiums of almost 100,000 people. All kinds of good stuff in my career, and I appreciate all of you guys coming over this way so that I could share some of the knowledge that I've learned with you. I think today we're going to continue our theme on drums. The last one we did a couple days ago, I was teaching something called ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, and release. Super important when it comes to drums. Attack, decay, sustain, release. The length of your notes. That's one of the most important things that a lot of producers in the beginning, a lot of amateur producers, they don't really think about. I think intuitively, a lot of us will hear a sample that we kind of maybe hear if it works or not, but we're not exactly sure in the beginning, why is that sample working? So in other words, if you download a super killer 808 kick drum and you put it in your track and it sounds good, well, often we know, okay, that sounds good, it's cool. But what happens if it's a little bit too long and it's muddying up the rest of your track, or you're trying to master your track and you can't get it loud like all of the tracks you hear on the radio? Well, a lot of times, especially with low 808 kick drums, you're going to have too much energy in the low end, and if the tails of those kick drums are too long, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So you can fix it pretty easily, but you have to know where to go to fix that. So that's what I was teaching, the ADSR thing. If you missed it, go back to the previous live stream. It should still be up there. Don't forget to share the stream, folks, and say hello. Michael Keys, thank you for dropping me a comment. I appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out. Today we're going to do some drum programming. And for today's lesson, I wanted to get into a little bit more of the actual meat and potatoes of programming drums. As you all probably noticed, I like to use Ableton for a lot of this stuff because I'm just the quickest in Ableton, so that's the way I can show you the quickest. But it all applies to FL Studio, Logic, GarageBand. It's all pretty much the same stuff. You're going to have a grid, you're going to have beats that you can put your notes on, and that's pretty much it. So that's the same for pretty much all of these programs, but the key is learning. I like to call it the function of every beat. So let's get into this, and I'll kind of show you what I mean. So before we actually do any programming, let me go ahead and pull up my trusty whiteboard here really quickly, because I did want to cover something that a lot of you, especially if you're a beginning producer, you may not be quite aware of just yet how this works. So I wanted to go ahead and show you this very quickly, and I wanted to give you basically a rundown on how the beats break down in a measure. So I think most of you should probably know how measures work. You got typically four beats to a measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. That's how you would count your measures. 4 beats per measure, typically. There's other types of time signatures, but we're not going to get into that today. We're just going to do 4 beats per measure. So what you need to learn how to do in the beginning is how to count. And if you don't know how to count, well, I'm going to teach you, because that's super important. So let's say this is measure 1. Let's say this is measure 2. Measure 3. And measure 4, right? So we're going to have in each one of these measures a quarter note, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And this would be another set of 1, 2, 3, 4. Another set. Now I'm not going to break each one of these down like this, so that'll take forever. But what I wanted to show you that's super important when you're programming drums is to know how to break down the beats into their smaller parts. So again, we got measure 1, beat 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So we can break this down further into eighth notes. So remember, the top ones are quarter notes. These are eighth notes. So what I like to do is count it like this. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to have 2 beats for the 1, 2 beats for the 2, 2 beats for the 3, 2 beats for the 4. So this is, I'm going to count 1. I call it E. I'm sorry, that's for the 16th notes. We'll keep it simple for the 8th notes. I call it and when I'm counting 8th notes. So we got 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and that's how I would count that. 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. So when you're counting beats, you got your quarter notes that are on the down beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. When you start counting the eighth notes are going to be on the upbeat. So you got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's it. So then we can break down the 1 even more into 4 beats. And this is how I count this. I say 1 E and I'll do a U for Then you got 2 E and so forth. So again, you got downbeats 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we break it up into eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Then we break it down into 16th notes, which are the E and So I'm going 1 E and. So that and is still between the bottom, the downbeat, and the upbeat. So we've got down 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and so that's how I count 16th notes when I'm thinking of making drum beats. Now again, when we go into Ableton and look at this, it's going to make a little bit more sense because we're going to be on the grid. So it's a little bit easier to understand on the grid. So let's put in a MIDI clip here. And I'm going to show you now that I showed you that explanation on how to count it. Let's take a look at down here. See, in Ableton, we have it broken up. Let's make this a 4. Actually, let's make it, well, we'll do 4 beats, like 4 measures like I just did. So if I play this and I put this kick on the 1, that's the 1 of measure 1. And then you can see here, these are the quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Measure 2, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So I'm just going to put these quarter notes in. And we'll just play that on a loop. Let's put that on the downbeat. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is going to be kind of like, this would be kind of like a house beat. 4 on the floor. And I'm just going to copy these over. 4 on the floor the whole way through. 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. So now I'm going to find us a, let's get us a nice little bit of percussion here so it'll be a little easier to see. Where's my percussion? This will work. So I'm going to bring this right up here to where this guy is so we can hear it. Okay. So now we've got quarter notes. Now we're going to do our eighth notes. And I just changed, I'm going to leave the grid up, but in Ableton, it may be hard to see on here, but I'm actually having the measure broken up into my 16th notes. So you can see I've got 4 squares here between beat 1 and 2. So this would be my 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and that's all in measure 1. So let's do the ands with the 8th note. Remember that was down, up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So these are the 8th notes. 1 and 2 and 3. So this is kind of quick. I'm going to slow it down a little bit so it'll be easier to follow. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? So what I'm going to do now, and this is actually the first real part of the lesson here with drum programming. I'm going to show you how quickly you can take just basically 2 sounds and start making some cool stuff with it. So I'm going to take this snare that I copied down here, and I'm going to make another copy of it right above it in my drum rack. So now I have 2 copies of the same drum. Same thing. But I don't obviously need 2 of those, so I'm going to go and edit this second one that I just did, and this is actually kind of involving the ADSR stuff that we covered on the previous stream. I'm gonna play this one. Okay, so there's my second snare. I'm using my MIDI controller to trigger it now. So I'm going to pull my release all the way back and pull my sustain and my decay back. So you hear how it's just a click? So this snare sample just went from a snare to a click. So using the same exact sample with that ADSR idea, I now have a click that I can use as kind of almost like a percussion. So we're going to use that for our 16th notes. 1, E, and then I'm going to copy this over. So now we've got the kick on the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we've got the E and using that snare percussion sample we just edited, and the snare is on the and. 1 E and 2 E and So let's hear that now. 3 E and So just that quickly you can start getting a beat. We're only using 2 samples. So I just wanted to show you, in case you weren't aware on how to count this stuff yet, that's pretty much the way you're going to do it. 1 E and 2 E and So using that same idea, we're at 100 BPM now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these snares, and what I wanted to really emphasize today was, you know, before I really understood drum programming, I was always confused as how were some of these producers getting these cool kind of grooves that you would hear, you know, on especially hip hop tracks, right? Well, not just hip hop tracks, but EDM tracks, house music, all of that stuff. I would be stuck programming on the grid, and at first I was like, oh, they must be moving the snare around. So I tried moving the snare around. I would try moving the kicks around. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But the main thing I wanted to convey to you today is that the feel of a track typically comes not from moving the kick or the snare. The kick, actually, you can move quite a bit, and that will have different effects. But I just wanted to convey to you today, the snare is typically going to be on just the 2 and the 4 about 95% of the time. So let's go ahead and put this snare on the 2 and the 4. And you can see I'm just lining these up with the grid right here. One beat 1, 2, and beat 4 of measure 1 right here. So it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, hitting that snare. And then let's go ahead and get rid of these snares, and we're going to copy these over to get them on the 2 and the 4 as well. So now we should have our snares on the 2 and the 4. I'm going to mute out the little percussion snare we made. All right, good. So we got our 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's add in this little percussion we did. So what I wanted to show you today is how using, it's actually percussion that typically gives us our groove. And you know, Mannie Fresh, where I'm from New Orleans originally, and Mannie Fresh, who I'm sure a lot of you guys out there are aware who Mannie Fresh is from Cash Money Records, he was a master of doing these super cool percussion samples that would actually give the track the groove. Because watch what happens. Let's start off with this snare that we're using, kind of like a hi-hat essentially. I'm going to copy that over and listen to what this sounds like. It's kind of boring, right? It's just very robotic. So the first thing we can do, and this is the second part I wanted to show you today, was we can mess with the velocity, which means how hard is the sample going to trigger. So for these, my quick key, I can just hit my command button on the keyboard, and I can actually lower the velocity of all of these at once. So this is, I'm kind of thinking of this sample as our hi-hat. So what I can do now is, especially if you've ever played real drums, it's a little bit easier to think about this. But the first thing you can do to liven up your drum tracks is to mess with the velocities of your percussion or your hi-hats. Because when people play drums in real life on a real drum kit, usually the kick drum and the snare are pretty steady the whole way. Just boom, ka, boom, ka, boom, ka. But the hi-hat is typically going to have a little more feel to it. So if I'm playing a hi-hat on a real drum kit, I'm going to have some variation in the way I'm hitting it with both of my hands and my sticks. So let's try and program in some variation here. So typically the first hit on a hi-hat is going to be pretty hard. So I'm gonna bring the velocity up on the hi-hat here, and then the next one is going to be a little bit softer. Then the next one's going to be a little bit harder again. Let's do it a little more dramatic so we can hear it. And then finally, the last one is going to be a little bit softer as well. So let me copy these over now to all of my track. It's a little bit better. But in my sampler here, I'm going to go into my controls, and I'm actually going to do this. It's called velocity to volume in Ableton in the sampler. FL Studio, Logic, they all have this in their samplers. You just have to find it. This says how much is the velocity that I just messed with going to affect the volume of the sample. So we're only at about 45% right now. I want it to affect my hi-hat a lot more. So I'm going to actually bump this up to about, let's try 85%. And let's see how that works. See how now we have a little bit more feel going. Let's bump it up all the way. All right, that's better. So like I said, we're getting somewhere with the velocity. It's a little bit better, but the real magic happens when you start adding in percussion. So let's find us a nice percussion sample. And I think we're going to substitute it for this guy right here. Let's go up here and see if we have... see if we have any kind of cowbells or something we can use for a cool percussion sound. Alright, I like that one. I'll tell you what, actually what I like really that Manny Fresh uses a lot is it's called a clave. Yeah, that's the one. Let's pop that in there. And let's bump him up in volume just a little bit. So again, to kind of tie this all together with that 1E and 2E and thing that I showed you in the beginning, if you know how to count that out, you can start thinking before you just place notes. There's nothing wrong with just placing notes, but if you kind of know what you're doing before you do it, it'll just make things quicker. So if we count 1E and 2E and one of the popular ways to do some percussion is on the 1E and So let's throw one on the right before beat 2. Ticka 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 tick ticka ticka ticka. 1E and 1E, 1E and 1E. So on the second beat, I'm gonna hit that E. So again, on beat 2, we have beat 1, 1E and I'm putting the percussion on the On beat 2, we have 2E and on the 2, I'm gonna put it on that E. And let's bring our velocity up here. So, but E and 2E and So you hear how we start getting a little bit of groove like that. So now, again, you can think about these notes before you just kind of plop them anywhere, and you can start getting a cool little groove going. Let's try that now. Let's move this one to the here. And then we'll finish it out there. So again, if you want to count these out, that's helpful. But the other big thing about this is instead of just randomly throwing notes around and kind of guessing, once you know how to count this stuff, so for this beat, for example, I'm listening to it. Let's listen to it one more time. So what you may notice when you start learning how to count this is you can make beats you can kind of warp them, if that's a good word to use, to function. Again, I like to think of things in terms of function. Like, what is the function here? Okay, the function of the percussion is to give it a little bit of groove. But then just beyond the groove, maybe I want to make this beat sound a little more urgent. So if we take these measures and we break them down into beats, beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, in measure 1, this first set of percussion is not coming in until the very end of beat 1. So maybe I have a track and I need it to feel a little more urgent. Well, I know, okay, I'm coming at the end of beat 1 with the percussion, and that's where the groove, the listener's going to start hearing the groove. So maybe what we need to do is move this percussion to one of those earlier notes, like the first 16th note, so that we can get a little more urgency. It comes in a little quicker. Let's listen to this now. See, so when that percussion comes in, it's going to tell the listener, oh, wait, something's happening quicker, so the beat is going to sound a little more urgent. Now, if you have a laid-back beat, that's cool. You can keep some stuff maybe toward the end of the measure. But again, I wanted to just introduce this concept to you because just randomly throwing notes, yeah, sometimes you'll get some cool stuff. But again, you may have an artist that you're working with that comes in and says, hey man, this beat is dope, but something sounds a little too laid back. And you're going to be thinking, okay, what does that mean? So I'm trying to show you some of these concepts to basically, the whole concept of music producer school that I'm trying to teach is basically problem solving. Because what you're going to find when you're doing production, especially for other artists, everybody has their own vision of what they're trying to achieve with a particular song or a particular sound. So what I'm trying to teach you is not just, okay, put the beat here, put this note here. I'm trying to teach you how to problem solve so that when you come up against something, maybe it's on your own track and you're listening back and you're like, yeah, it's cool, but something sounds a little lazy or a little too laid back. Okay, well now, based on counting and knowing how to arrange this percussion, you already have a problem-solving tool that can help you. Okay, if it's a little lazy, let me try and push the percussion forward a little bit. And if it's a little too fast, maybe we like the tempo, but we want to push the percussion back a little bit. So I'm hoping to convey some problem-solving skills for you. So let's listen to this one more time. So let me show you another popular way to do this, and this is going to be more with a snare. See, and that's another thing also. When you know how to count this stuff, what I like to do is with my hands. One hand, and I'll do the E and a. 1 E and a, 2 E and a. So that way I can do it slower than the tempo I'm at, but I can still count the 16th notes. So 1 E and a. So I'm going to put it here. Let's do that. So we're going to copy this over and see if you recognize this. So I'm going to take that clave and I'm going to replace it with this snare and see if you recognize this drum pattern, because this is basically how they're able to achieve some of these sounds. So I don't want to replace my drum kit. I want to just dump this sample in there. So if any of you are familiar with bounce music was created where I'm from in New Orleans. And the same technique that I'm showing you is basically kind of the standard beat that they use for bounce music. So I'm going to throw this snare in here. And all I want is this little piece right here. I'm going to go right up to where it starts. So now we got our bounce snare in there, and let's see what this sounds like. And then there we go. I'm going to copy that over. And then let's throw in on this last beat, that last little 16th note. That would be 4 E and on the . So now we could find another cool little percussion element. Let's do that 808 cowbell. That's another one of Manny Fresh's favorite. And we'll throw it right here so I can show you on the grid. And again, I'm just kind of thinking in these 16th notes. I'm going to use a little velocity here. And just like that, we start getting a little groove on our beat. Now, the other thing that's missing here, like I showed you in the beginning, but I didn't do it yet, and it shows you why it's important, is the velocity on this snare, because we're not just doing the 2 and the 4 on this snare. So right here is my 2 with this bounce snare, and my 4. So in between, we want to grab the notes in between, and we want to just do a little accent with the velocity there. So now I can copy those over and we'll have a little more. Again, velocity and groove go together as well. So just like that, you can get yourself a little groove going. You don't even necessarily have to have a whole bunch of samples. Like I said, with the ADSR stuff that I showed you in the previous live stream, you can actually, and that's, if you've ever wondered how a lot of producers, they would make a track, and I used to wonder this in the beginning myself, they would make beats, and for some reason the samples would just sound like they go together. And if you've ever noticed, if you just start grabbing random samples from different packs and you put them in a drum kit together, they don't always sound like they go together, and you wind up, you're trying to EQ the snare a bunch, you're trying to, you know, put reverb on the percussion, you're trying to do all this different stuff. And basically what happens is a lot of producers at the higher levels, what they're doing is they'll have a few samples that are their go-to solid samples, and then they'll actually take, for instance, the snare that they're going to use, and like I just showed you with that sampler and the ADSR thing where you can shorten the sample a lot, they'll actually make their hi-hats, they'll make some percussion. We didn't get into any stuff like pitching down or pitching stuff up yet, but you can take these same samples that you use just for your kick and your snare, and you can create a whole palette of sounds just from those 2 samples by the ADSR stuff and by pitching up and pitching down. And again, the velocity stuff you can use to accent certain things. So there's a whole bunch of things that we didn't cover yet today, but I wanted to just show this to you first because, again, I'm trying to start from the beginning and show you more of some problem solving techniques, so that way, you know, anybody can just look at a beat grid and just say, oh, okay, put the beats here, here, and here. But like I said, I wanted to show you kind of how these things function first, so that way when you come up against something in your own production, you can start to think on your own and problem solve on your own. So I think I'm going to wrap it up here for today. If anybody has any questions, feel free to send me a message on the Facebook page, or you can leave a comment here on the stream, and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. I think on the next stream, which is going to be Saturday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'm going to do a little bit more of a full drum programming example, and I'm also going to show you, as opposed to the groove stuff with percussion, I'm going to show you how much the kick drum can affect the feel of your track on the next live stream. So be sure to tune into that. That one is super helpful, especially if you're trying to produce stuff that you want to be played in a club. I've been a DJ for just about the same length of time I've been producing, and I can tell you for a fact that the kick drum and even the arrangement of the kick drum can definitely affect whether or not your track is going to get played in the club or not. So be sure to tune in Saturday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, and I will see you guys again on Saturday. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for joining me today, and be sure to share the stream with your friends. I'll see you next time. Peace out.